let me set up this first panel. I'm Don von Dollen. I'm with the Electric Power Research Institute. We're a nonprofit. We do research and development relating to all aspects of electricity generation, delivery, and consumption. And what we've done today for the agenda for this workshop is we've set up panel sessions on various aspects of grid modernization. And we've selected these topics very carefully. So things like distribution automation, communications technology, planning processes, because we see these are really key issues when it comes to modernizing the electrical system. So for this morning, we're focusing on customer-facing technologies. So these are technologies on the customer side of the meter. So it could be things like photovoltaic systems, which you're very familiar with here in Hawaii. Could be storage systems. It could be home automation systems, things like smart thermostats. It could be data analytic platforms that allow customers to really understand their energy consumption and control their costs. So we have a very prestigious panel of experts here who are going to be talking with you today on different aspects of customer-facing technologies. So let me introduce the panelists. We have Chris Black, who's the Chief Operating Officer for Tendril. Tendril provides energy management software, hardware, and services. Excuse me. The company provides customized energy programs for energy awareness, load control, demand response, electric vehicles, and distributed generation functions. Martin Milani is responsible for strategy, development, and delivery at Sunburst. Sunburst provides distributed energy storage systems that capture solar power. The company builds systems that use local and cloud-based software to combine batteries, power electronics, and multiple energy inputs. We have Cole Hershkovitz, is the founder of Chai Energy. Chai Energy provides a data analytics platform that allows customers to understand their energy usage and costs. We have Jesse Bryson, is responsible for market development at Advanced Microgrid Solutions. The company offers analytics, demand management, and distributed energy resources that allow energy users to develop reliable on-site resources for home and for businesses. So format for this session, I've asked each of the panelists to come up here and make a 10-minute presentation, offer their insights. And what I've asked them to do is to share with you both what's possible when it comes to customer-facing technologies, but also what's real. So what's been implemented in other places, and how have customers been engaged? How have they accepted these technologies? What has been the impact of these technologies? What's resulted from the use of these technologies? So ask them to share those thoughts. After they've made their presentations, I'm going to open it up to you for questions. So this is your chance, right? These are really leading experts in this area. So ask questions. You know, how will this particular technology go over in Hawaii? So this is your chance to ask questions. If you don't ask questions, then I'll have to ask questions. So, so please ask questions. And so with that, let me introduce the first presenter, which is Chris Black from Tendril.
Hello, everyone. So Colton was introducing us and thanking everyone for coming, thanking the panelists for coming. But I think the thanks really goes to you guys for creating a reason for us all to be here. It's Wednesday. I've been here since Saturday because I'm that dedicated. Definitely not snorkeling in Hama Bay. Definitely not having too many Mai Tais on the beach on Monday. Really just holed up in my room rehearsing this presentation. So thank you for creating the reason to be here. It's been fantastic. So Tendril, very briefly on Tendril, maybe next slide. The slides aren't here. So we think about the industry in this way. There are kind of three key factors that are creating kind of dynamics in the market that are different than they have ever been. We believe strongly that the value accrues to whomever owns the relationship with the consumer. And until recently, we as an industry have been kind of too eager to kind of give up that relationship and allow the utility relationship to be kind of disintermediated by others. And I think really going forward as demand level continues to level off or decrease, and the drive for electrons is no longer increasing shareholder value, we as an industry are going to need to find new ways of monetizing the customer through additional products and services. And so that relationship with the customer is paramount. It is the only way, really having that relationship is the only way that we're going to transition into that next generation products and services provider. And kind of step 2 and step 3 there are really making that point that the way we make money and the traditional business model is under duress from, as you know very well here, the penetration of renewables, the overall decline of base load or leveling off of base load. So that forces a new way of thinking. It forces a thinking around how we're going to continue making money in new ways. And I think if you look at areas like REV in New York, starting to test ways of allowing utilities to make new revenues than they have in the past, I think we're going to see more and more of that. Next slide. So not surprisingly, Tendril is, there'll be a little bit of salesy stuff in here. I promise it's very minimal, mostly so you guys kind of know what we do, so that you can ask me some questions. We have 3 solution lines that kind of align with those kind of 3 tenets of what we believe. First is next generation engagement. So I think gone are the days where if you just make information available, people will come. If we build it, they will come. We as an industry have spent billions and billions and billions of dollars building portals to allow our users to come and get more information. I think what we find is, there's a small segment that will, and maybe they will one month but not the next month, because it's not, as engaging as these portals are, we're still putting the onus on the consumer to kind of come and get the information rather than kind of meeting them where they already are. So our next generation engagement is really kind of focused on meet the customer where they already are, move towards a kind of a push model rather than a pull model, push information that is relevant and timely for them in a way that resonates with them. Home energy management is our next solution line, and that's all around kind of next generation demand response. And I'll finish with the presentation on a little bit more on that. But the way that DR in the residential space has worked in the past has been fairly one-sided in that there's an imbalance between the demand and supply, and so a DR event will be sent down, great for the grid, not great for consumers. And everything hopefully that you hear from us today is really kind of put the consumer at the center of your thinking, and if you do so, that traditional DR kind of approach doesn't really work for consumers. But I think there's a better way now. And then finally, ecosystem. So as the products and services mix that we're selling as an industry continues to change, tapping into other industries, ancillary industries like real estate, where people are there's huge volumes that happen on real estate transactions, real estate websites, partnering with those, where people are the most likely to be making home improvements and energy efficiency upgrades and renewables, making those decisions, meeting them where they already are, and kind of tying into those other industries in order to kind of progress your own interests. Next slide. So I thought this was a relevant quote here. Continue on the kind of that next generation engagement slide or theme. I like this. Mobile is not the future; it is the now. Meet your customers in the environment of their choice, not where it's convenient for you. And that's not mine. That's Cindy Schaffstall. But the idea here is that we have done a good job of making information available. People aren't not engaging with energy, not saving, kind of changing behaviors because they don't have the data. I think the data is now out there. The reason they aren't is because we're not making it available in a way that is kind of meeting them where they are. And the world has gone mobile. It's not going mobile, it's gone mobile. And so taking advantage of mobile, taking advantage of social channels, taking advantage of all of the billions and billions of chats that are sent every single day and tapping into those environments, I think is a way of meeting customers where they are. Next slide. So a few stats. I'm not going to talk about many of these, but I'm sure this information will be sent out to everybody afterwards. I think these are pretty compelling. I mean, things like users are spending 90% of their time in apps compared to the mobile web, but yet I think most of the time when we as an industry think about making sure that our information optimizes well on a phone, we're thinking about the mobile optimization on web pages, and that's really not where users are spending time. And so if you're not really thinking native mobile push, getting information to people in a relevant way so they don't have to think about it, it just kind of comes to them when they need to know, giving them heads up ahead of time so there's no shock, is kind of where people now expect their solution providers to be. Next slide. So, I think in summary of all of that, our customers of today, expectations have changed a lot, and that's really driven by other service industries that they're kind of interacting with every day. I think online banking, airlines, kind of retailers like Amazon, those experiences have basically taught our customers how to think and how to expect service from their service providers, and we're really no different. And so I think, kind of thinking about consolidating the experiences into a single mobile app that allows the information to be pushed to people, whether it's an outage alert or a bill pay reminder or energy efficiency recommendation or a recommendation to enroll in the program that you might be offering, all of that being done in a consistent, unified way, push first so that customers just kind of don't have to think about it, I think is the way to engage with their customers in the future. Next slide. So that's a failed pitch for Tendril My Home. My Home is one of our applications that does just that, consolidates all of those services across kind of everything you'd want to say to your customers. Next slide. Okay, so you've engaged your users by meeting them where they already are. Now what are you going to do with all that newfound trust that you've just earned? Going back to kind of where I started, one of the problems with demand response and kind of active demand management inside the home has been that it's been fairly kind of favoring the grid needs over the consumer needs. And I think when you're really thinking about putting a consumer at the center of your decision making, that equation doesn't really work. And so next slide. Next slide after that. So the way that this has been done in the past has been this kind of one-sided equation of making sure that you can kind of balance the demand and supply at the cost of the consumer, where you're shutting off the things that they need the most when they need it. And obviously that's good to protect the stability of the grid, but not good for the homeowners. And so last salesy bit from me. So we launched a new solution last year called Orchestrated Energy. Orchestrated Energy is continuous demand management inside the home. So we talk directly to loads in the home like smart thermostats and hot water heaters, and orchestrate those things inside the home to spread the load out from the peak. So you can give it any abstract cost curve, whether that be a time of use tariff or a generation curve or a green-brown mix or a cost of supply, whatever it is, it doesn't care. And Orchestrated Energy on a home-by-home basis will automatically spread the load around relative to that cost curve to avoid the peak, to make the homes more energy efficient, and do it in a way that still keeps users comfortable. So really kind of keeping that balance of the grid needs, the utility needs, and the customer needs, and really keeping them comfortable so that they allow you to kind of do these things that are good for your business. And that's it for me. Thank you.
Okay, I'll try to be pretty quick. My name is Milani. I'm from Sunburst. Next slide, please. Sunburst has been around since 2009. I think the only thing I would stress out here is from very early on, we thought that distributed energy, utility class distributed energy resources was a missing link when it came to the smart grid. The ability to actually tie in demand to the grid resources instantaneously is what the smart grid was all about, and we believe that very early on, back in 2009, the distributed energy resources was the missing link in that process. Next slide, please. If you could hit all three things so they all show up in one time. Our marketing people do this to me all the time. I'm not super visual. Anyhow, I think, interestingly, if I were to pretty much sum up this slide in one line, is that the grid modernization has begun, but it's really beginning below the meter. The consumers are driving the change. That PV penetration has blown away every forecast since 2008. In fact, just in California, we had PV penetrations. We met what we thought we were going to meet in 2020 last month. So this is all happening at the customer side. This is a customer trend. This is a full-blown customer trend, and I believe that customer trends should be treated as a friend. So this is happening irrespective of whatever is happening on the grid. And now the grid needs to actually adapt to the customer itself and what's happening below the meter, which is pretty much, I think, what we're going to talk about a little bit later today. So the customers are changing. They are deploying these sorts of technologies. Aggregators and third-party service providers are sort of servicing the customers. And in return, all ties back to the utility, as the utility is the glue that brings all these things together. And the utilities themselves are facing obviously lower demand, lower prices for bulk energy, but as well as all the things that are these distributed energy resources, all these customer-facing technologies are doing to the grid itself with respect to how it operates, its resiliency, as well as the intermittency of some of these technologies. Next slide, please. So what we're really seeing is this emergence of a platform, and I think everybody is probably one way or another here today are going to talk about the platform, and their stories are going to be somewhat similar. That is a good thing. That basically means whatever is occurring, and multiple people are actually seeing it. So there's a facilitated platform that's emerging here that basically are going to facilitate transactions and interactions between consumers, aggregators, and the utilities. And actually the benefits and the values are pretty clear to all, which is again a good thing, as this sort of interdependency is sort of solidifying. For consumers, obviously maximizing PV investments, bill management, backup power, et cetera, demand charge reduction. I mean, you all know this stuff. For DER aggregators, aggregating PV and storage, providing DPP type offering to the wholesale market, creating additional service revenues below the meter, and ability to actually aggregate these things and participate in wholesale markets is a pretty clear opportunity that they're going after. The traditional demand response aggregators obviously are also seeing this as pretty interesting. I mean, as Chris mentioned, demand response has not been the kind of, has not gotten the kind of response, if you will, simply because there's something called customer comfort, and it really actually doesn't address customer comfort easily. You don't really want to turn off your AC when it's 110 degrees 3 days in a row. And using distributed storage as a demand response resource actually allows you to deal with the customer comfort, basically discharge from the battery, run whatever you're doing from the battery, therefore do not actually reduce customer comfort and still actually do the curtailment, and also the ability to have the location awareness of this. I mean, aggregation of the demand response is nice when you actually are trying to bring down overall curtailment. But typically, as far as the utility is concerned, as far as the distribution grid operator is concerned, location is everything. Where and when you are actually calling on a demand response resource means a lot. Typically, these things are due to not next day events. Often they are due to emergency events, and you need to know exactly where the curtailment is coming from. And also maximizing utilization, right? I mean, a typical device-centric demand response programs give you a measure or give you a load share curtailment very specific to a device. Using storage actually can give you a pretty well sort of balanced curtailment across the entire use in the home, which is sort of kind of closer to a coincidence load shape, et cetera, et cetera. So it's not a device-centric load shape, but it's an overall base case, best case load shape, if you will. And for the utilities, it's obviously peak, you know, these are pretty common, peak load and load reduction and shifting, meeting renewable standards and goals, frequency regulation and voltage management, which goes back, and I mean this from an operational perspective, which actually has to be pretty real time and requires sort of semi-real-time control. And also the distribution asset upgrade deferral and et cetera, et cetera. So it's pretty clear values across the entire chain. Next slide, please. So what the Sunburst Platform, and it's probably the only slide that we talk about what we do, is it allows for facilitating and enabling of energy transactions between consumers, utilities, and aggregators. End-to-end management and controlling and aggregation and orchestration, which is pretty important of portfolios of distributed energy resources and everything and smart devices in the home. These things are actually tied in together. Aggregating of residential and commercial distributed energy resources into virtual power plants, and basically overlaying that on top of the utility distribution grid, which I was just talking about a little bit. Where are these things on a feeder? Where are these things with respect to the circuit? These are part of, these assets are in fact part of the grid. And I think that's a new way of looking at it. Controlling and optimizing the VPP assets to better manage dynamic T&D network and supply events, which is, this is not just, this actually also has to do with semi-real-time control of the distribution grid itself. And take all this excess capacity, bid it into a market, slightly different model. And really what we are doing here is integrating demand-side management and grid management. This has been probably a holy grail since the Carter administration a very long time ago, and probably some of you guys remember that. I do. This is something that we've been looking at for a long time as an industry, and now with the distributed energy resources, we can do exactly that. And eventually, we believe that, you know, 5-10 years down the road, you are going to see something similar to what you have at the bulk power generation level with the ISOs. You're going to have that sort of emerge at the distribution level, which is sort of kind of the distribution DSO type markets. We think this will evolve, and that could be a sort of potentially a utility 4.0. I guess everyone's talking about utility 2.0. But eventually it's going to come to that, which is basically means consumers are not prosumers, and these things are flowing back and forth, and somebody actually needs to manage all those transactions. Next slide, please. So what does it really look like at the, you know, I would say about probably 100,000 foot level is the ability to aggregate these resources, DERs, controlling all these smart appliances, all the HEMS devices at home, bringing them together, overlaying them on top of utility distribution, take them closer and closer to utility operations, to things like such as, you know, distribution resource planning, distribution operations, and so on and so forth, all the way down up to the transmission, because all this this is a single connected network, by the way, and the network doesn't stop at the meter. The network goes below the meter all the way up to everything at the transmission line. And apparently all the way up to the wholesale markets. And we also do believe that now there is this distribution level sort of markets that are going to emerge in the next 5 years. And at the 50,000 watt level, this is what this the platform looks like. Next slide, please. and tying all of these things that we talked about, or tying all these below the meter activities, if you will, including the distributed energy resources into the core utility operation is where it's going to be at. These things actually need to be resources and assets just like any other resource and asset. It needs to tie into things like customer care, demand side management, distribution operations, transmission operations, generations, resource planning, distribution resource planning, integrated resource planning. These things actually are part of the grid and needs to be treated that way and needs to be controlled that way as well. Next slide, please. Okay, I'm almost done. So at a very high level, this is edge computing for grid edge devices. That's what we do. The ability to look at massive amounts of data and basically have ability to do local control and local optimization. There is no time to actually do this kind of stuff in the cloud. So you need to have local intelligence and you need to do things, local optimizations at the consumer premise to actually do this right. Considering what's happening behind the meter, as also above the meter with the grid. Next slide, please. So, value scale, PV has a certain amount of value to customer and to utility. PV in the storage is more. PV in the storage and appliance control more, and et cetera, et cetera. And as you basically marry demand side management and grid management, that's where there's a ton of value, not just to the consumer, but also to the utility as well. Next slide, please. So at the end, as I mentioned, the missing link for the smart grid and transactional energy markets is distributed storage. That's what we believe, and we believe that's where the market's going over the next 5 to 10 years. That's my last slide.
Good morning, everyone. So, Chris, thank you for those recommendations of things not to do in my stay till Sunday. Actually, while we were sitting here in the last hour, I think we've kind of transitioned from early adoption in solar to the middle fattest part, and that's because Tesla has started taking pre-orders on their solar roof. I really think with an aesthetically pleasing product, you're going to see this transformation that we're sitting here talking about how to handle accelerate even faster. So it's very prescient we're having this workshop. All right, what slides am I on? All right, so I'm Cole. Spent some time at Southern California Edison working in the advanced technology group there. It was right on the tail end of Edison's rollout of 4.9 million smart electric meters. So a lot of what we're doing at Chai Energy, which is our company, is really based around the idea of how do you take this multi-billion-dollar asset that the utility put out there, and they put it out for their own economic means, really, and how do you create customer value from it? It's actually, people don't realize it, but that smart electric meter on the outside of your home, there aren't many, if any, here in Hawaii, but on the mainland there are quite a few. It's actually the most prevalent smart IoT device in people's homes. Much more penetrated than Nest Smart thermostats, probably than all smart IoT devices combined. So I think it's really important that we look at the assets that are out there and we try to figure out how to get value from them. I'm going to do my presentation a little bit more from the perspective of the consumer side. I think we all understand in a very deep way the importance of a platform. The utility and the ISO and how we regulate our markets is effectively a platform, mostly dealing with C&I, and now we have to figure out how to adopt that to the customer. But the most important aspect of that is, why are customers going to care? Are they going to care? They're probably not. So how do we make it feel like they care? So on average, customers waste $300 every year on their electric bill. Go to the next slide. It comes from a variety of ways. People don't often know how they're wasting. So some people, it's your kids leaving the lights on or playing Xbox really late. I've left the stove on more times than I care to admit in my house. Broken air conditioners, bad insulation. Some people should get solar and they don't have solar. So there are many different ways to waste energy. Next slide. And when we get our electric bill, it only raises more questions than answers. It tells you this is how much you owe, and then people say, why the hell do I owe that much? And then you try to excuse me, you try to figure it out and you look at these lines, it says transmission, distribution, and people don't know it doesn't help. Next slide. The best way to deal with it today is an energy audit. Getting a person to come into your home, a professional. First, you have to know what an energy audit is, and you have to not be scared of it and not worry they're going to turn up your old IRS tax return. It's your energy, not your taxes. But someone comes into your home, they put this weird thing in your door and makes your home look like it's part of a hazmat site, a blower door test. They look for insulation leaks, they look for infiltration. It's a very invasive process. Most customers don't want to do this. Next slide. Energy monitoring as an industry is focused on kind of data presentment and visualization. I think, as Chris was saying, we really have to get beyond the idea that customers need to dig for the information that they need. Go to the next slide. This is the thing I already mentioned about smart meters. Next slide. There's a lot of smart meters out there, huge asset. You can figure out a lot from that data, from that smart meter data. It's very rich, so whether you're getting the 15-minute interval data or real-time second-by-second data, you can figure out a lot. Next slide. So this is Chai Energy. It's an application, it's a mobile app, goes into people's homes, helps them figure out exactly where they're wasting money on their electric bill. We frame everything around energy waste. People have waste aversion. They could care less about saving an extra buck or two, but if you tell them that they're throwing money down the drain, they, subconsciously they start to perk up. And we boil it down to very specific concrete ways you're wasting. We tell people the schedule of their thermostat. We tell them how much they could save if they rescheduled it. We tell them how that aligns with when they're home or when they're not home, so they know when they could reschedule it when they tend to not be home, which is an amazing thing you can do with the little device in your pocket, is figure out when people are home. We send alerts to people if they leave their stove on. We compare your refrigerator to that brand new Energy Star one in the market and show you the savings and the payback. Usually it's not very good for a new fridge, but utilities still spend billions of dollars every year on fridge rebate programs because of deemed savings, because there's a certain rebate that you get for fridges. And really, I think what we're seeing in California is that the market is moving to a more market-based approach. We have programs that are piloted by PG&E that are not run and orchestrated by the utility, but it's an open market for energy efficiency. People get paid based off actual reduction, and it's these sort of truly capitalistic, truly competitive opportunities that you open up by having real meter data from people's homes. Go to the next slide. Next slide. Chai, so Chai Energy, it's a mobile app. There's two versions. There's Chai Lite and Chai Pro. Chai Pro is collecting real-time second-by-second data from your meter. And with that second-by-second data, customers actually go in and they tag appliances. You essentially snap a picture of your appliance, you turn it on. We then create a profile of that, and it's a way for customers to inventory their home. And then we can consult an energy auditor or a solar guy or even a battery guy, come and look at the appliances you have, look at your load shape, and provide you a very detailed, very comprehensive, very pinpointed evaluation of where you can save money. So we'll connect customers to these aftermarket products and services, and typically not through the utility channels. The utility channels are slow and clumsy. We like to work with local solar installers, and I say this coming from a utility too, so I'm allowed to say that. So we'll work with local solar installers. We'll work. There's a large, which we'll hear about later today, SGIP program in California. It's putting batteries out. There's a number of kind of solar installers that are now being battery installers. We work with energy auditors. We'll work with retail energy providers, the ones that are quicker and more nimble in general. Next slide. Okay, this is all, you guys have probably seen these features on other apps and other services, so I'll go over one more thing and then cut off a little bit early. I think, does anyone here, who knows what an API is? So an API generally is kind of it's a interface between one company and another company that's typically all the time automated, and essentially you request some sort of information or data over the internet, and then that service responds to you. So I want to log into Facebook. Facebook says, all right, you can log in. Here's your authentication token. I think what's interesting is to look at the utility company, and the utility was really the original API. Someone sends a request, they turn a switch. That means I want electricity, I want power for the device on the other side of the switch, and that device turns on, and it gives them power regardless, and that service is a commodity. Even though it's a very valuable service, it's priced as a commodity. The utility is not charging you for light, and they're not charging you for vacuuming or a clean house. They're charging you for a commodity, and that's really the essence of an API. And really where I'm taking this is that we have this kind of data layer that's in the last 30 years infiltrated our society and really everything we do, all these devices in our pockets, on our laptops, on our laps. And you're seeing that utilities are going to utilities have their own data network overlaid on top of their power network, and they are going to have to take that data network, in my opinion, open it up to third parties, make that data available, and allow third parties to create innovative, open opportunity or open systems and software for customers. And that's going to be even more and more important given the advent of solar, which is behind the meter, given the soon advent of batteries, given the impending growth of electric vehicles. These things are all behind the meter assets. Well, what we're seeing in California's utilities really don't want anything to do with that. So they're going to have to open up, create a nice, seamless platform on which for third parties to operate, and that's kind of the space that Chai plays in. Thank you.
All right, good morning. Jesse Bryson with Advanced Microgrid Solutions. Advanced, and I'll describe sort of what we're doing in the energy space. We present ourselves as a platform company as well. We're deploying behind the meter assets, and to date it's really been energy storage projects, but we're looking at different DERs based on the need of the utility. We are utility facing, and we work with utilities to try to identify what their needs are and then customize a solution to meet that need. The platform that we have will co-optimize the benefits of these deployed assets so that the customers can receive bill savings, the utility can achieve the grid services they need, and then also there's potential wholesale market revenue that we'll try to extract from the aggregated portfolio of resources. So the platform is really an economic optimization. You know, we're not looking at the needs on the grid so much as how do we work with the utility to figure out where to deploy them, and then once deployed, how do we maximize the value of those. We have a couple contracts with Southern California Edison, where I came from. I spent 14 years there running their energy procurement and sort of leading Edison's drive into the distributed resource space before I decided to go join a startup. We've got 90 megawatts under contract. We're deploying these projects in Southern California right now, and I'll show you some examples of that on later slides. We've done some first-of-its-kind project financing with large behind-the-meter assets, which got quite a bit of headlines. And we're trying to create a model that's replicable, where we can take enterprise customers in Southern California and then leverage those to solve a utility need in Massachusetts or in Hawaii or in other states. You want to advance? Next slide, please. So we try to harness the whole building load and to extract as much value from the load as we can. Some companies focus more on just sort of the demand charge management, whereas we figure there's more we can do with that load. So we will, from the host customer perspective, we'll certainly clip the demand charge to provide savings there, but we'll also do demand management where we'll shift kilowatt hours from an on-peak rate to an off-peak rate to provide savings there. We'll also size it in a way that can provide that utility capacity, which is that load drop you're seeing. It looks from a utility perspective like firm demand response that is there, doesn't suffer from customer fatigue. It's it will always show up and provide the services. And then we can also, when aggregated, provide the benefit to the wholesale market as well. In advance, please. The optimization that we're doing, like I said, we want to work with utilities. We want to find areas on the grid where there is a need and solve that need. And what you're looking at here is Southern California, where we have a contract to deploy batteries to solve a need under 2 A-Bank substations. And the first contract we have will come online later this year. It's 10 megawatts. Most of that will actually be met through deployments at Irvine Company, where we'll have 24 locations where we've deployed large Tesla power packs, and then we can aggregate those up. And the point being that a bunch of deployments across a large grid doesn't have a lot of impact. Whereas if you can locate those in a specific area and aggregate them up, it provides a meaningful impact that the grid operators can actually rely on and count and view and count as a grid resource. So as you see here, we've got the deployment under this A-Bank, and then when we push that button, or the utility or CalISO, in our case, sends a signal, then we have that firm load drop. And the platform will re-optimize the use of the batteries every 5 to 15 minutes, depending on what's going on. And if there's a customer that has a particularly large energy consumption, there may be more of the battery that's used in that case, and then the other ones will back off, so as to achieve the most savings from the customer, as well as meeting that grid need for the utility. We have at this point, I think there's 12 megawatts deployed, 12 megawatt hours deployed, and we will have a 10 megawatt contract later this year that will be operational. But we've got over a year of data where we've seen these the batteries in action, and we respond to utility demand response products as well. Next slide. Because we are trying to capture larger building loads and looking to do something that's replicable, we target certain verticals, we call it. We're looking at hospitals and airports where there are large loads that we can manage. We've had quite a bit of success with the REITs, and recently we had an announcement that we've got a relationship with Walmart that where we're deploying 40 megawatt hours of batteries at Walmart sites in Southern California. And as we expand into other markets, like I said, we'll take that relationship we have with those customers and leverage that to deploy batteries in other areas. And sort of go back to something I said earlier, we want to work with the utility to solve their problems. And while the company was founded on deploying batteries, what we're seeing is there are a lot of instances where batteries are not the right solution. If there's a longer duration need, batteries just don't make economic sense. And so what we're focusing on is how can we deploy a combination of DERs and leverage our optimization platform to achieve the need at lowest cost for customers. And sometimes that looks like solar plus storage, where you can then fill more of that need. In other markets like Texas, where the customers are really looking for resiliency when there's a longer outage, it's a battery paired with a genset. So you have a warm bridge to resiliency, and you can keep the lights on in a grocery store for an entire day. And then we can still leverage the platform that we have to aggregate up those deployments and provide savings to co-ops or retail providers in Texas. So each market is different. We do want to make sure we're providing that customized solution, so we're meeting the utility's needs as well as capturing the value for customers. And coming from Edison, I spent a lot of time doing procurement, but then was also involved in looking at strategy for the utility. What does it mean as customers adopt distributed resources on a greater rate? And I think that the change is coming. Customers are starting to really engage in energy. You're seeing it first with larger enterprise customers who are worried about sustainability and they're focused on cost. But I think as that happens, I think you're going to see sort of evolution where more and more customers are going to want, a solar panel on the roof and a power wall in the garage, and the utility needs to be able to capture those resources and for the benefit of the grid and really maximize the value of those. That's why we're focused on working with the utility, not necessarily just pushing product for them to contract.
Thank you. Really interesting set of presentations. I want to open it up to you for questions and answers. Any questions for our panelists?
Terry Searles, Florida State University. Although part of my question is going to be directed at my work with the California Public Utility Commission.
Terry, if you don't mind, for folks on the phone.
And my question is, it's a very, first of all, a great set of presentations. But the question goes back to the earlier presenters were really talking about how do you really address working with the customers about how you change these things. And the last presenter, and I'm actually quite familiar with what you're doing with Edison, it's more focused on working with the utility in terms of ADR and things like that. So the real question is, how do you combine the two to be more focused on the customer, which I find very intriguing. And also, even though the slides show the idea that you're kind of dealing with load in terms of addressing peak issues, a lot of things we're seeing now is the reverse. You have almost too much electricity because of the large amount of solar during the middle of the day. So you have to treat DR in terms of a shift, where you may want to use more load early or shift that load to shift this to a later time in the day. So how do you guys deal with this both from a customer perspective and also dealing with the utility? Because it's basically two different things you're getting at in terms of your focus.
I'll start. Yeah, good question. So this is probably something I omitted to say. So we only sell, our customers are utilities. We only sell through utility channels. Ultimately we are a B2B2C play, so we're putting solutions in end users' hands. But we only sell to utilities and through utilities to solve utility problems. And one of those big problems is figuring out who are the right customers that should be in this particular program. How do we identify them? How do we get at them? How do we recruit them in? And so we do a lot of work. All of your utility data as a customer flows through our platform. So we use an army of data scientists to slice and dice that data to understand, okay, where are we having problems? What problem are we having? How are we going to best solve that by creating a program design to target those people, understand what their motivators are, recruit them in. So that all happens kind of up front to understand who best to solve for a particular problem you have. So if you're having a capacity problem in a particular area, that kind of work we do together, Tendril and our utility partners. And then to your second part of that question of especially in Hawaii, we actually have the opposite problem. We have generation happening when people aren't using. We're using like through EV charging at night when we're not generating. And so we fully understand that. That's really what orchestrated energy was built to do. So either it can move, basically you give it a cost curve, and it will optimize around that cost curve on a particular on a home by home basis. So that cost curve could be your generation curve. So you actually want to move load under the generation curve, not out from underneath an expensive peak period. So that is actually by design what orchestrated energy does. So effectively, AMS and us are trying to solve the same problem in that we are, for different kind of end users, they're more focused on C&I, we're focused on residential, but essentially we're both trying to solve a load problem, whether that's too much load at the wrong time, too little load at the wrong time, but doing it in a way that doesn't inconvenience the customer. They do that through kind of batteries to kind of level that out. We do that by treating the home as a battery. So we actually can turn that home effectively into the battery, use the thermal mass of the home to charge, discharge, so that you can ride through the peak periods and move things under a generation curve that you're using when you're generating. So that's how we approach that problem.
I don't have a whole lot to add. Well done. One of the things that you touched on was trying to engage customers and how to engage a customer in a way that both meets their need as well as the utility need. And I think storage has a unique way of doing that, whereas utilities have had demand response programs for years. Those programs have resulted in many customers being very uncomfortable, and you've seen customer fatigue. You've seen businesses not want to participate because it impacts their manufacturing process. Batteries are a unique way to address that concern. Batteries can be programmed to dispatch whenever there's a need, so it doesn't necessarily have to be at the peak period of the day, where, as we're seeing in California and here, there's plenty of solar to meet that need. And instead, they can be programmed to meet a need in the evening. The reliance on a battery rather than a traditional DR program allows the customer to not have to change anything. They can keep their air conditioner on. They can continue to run their manufacturing process, and they truly are indifferent as to whether there's a DR event or not. So that's a different way to engage the customer and a compelling story to tell them in terms of getting them interested in new forms of products.
I would just probably add, not necessarily to answer your question directly, I think probably in the near future you're going to get to a situation where you're going to get closer and closer to what people call net zero homes. You are going to actually get people might need very little energy from the grid, or are going to be very selective about when, because of exactly all the orchestration between intelligent devices, between HEMS, between PVs, and between storage. It's going to basically look like a very different problem set. And in order to do that, you're going to have to optimize not only below the meter, but optimize below the meter and above the meter at the same time with respect to what's exactly happening on the grid. And the grid itself is becoming an orchestrator of interconnected homes that are generating. And I think the problem set, as Colton mentioned, is changing. What you have is a highly centralized model with one-way delivery, and you're basically going to a highly decentralized model with bidirectional delivery. And I think that's what that optimization is now needs to solve that problem, as opposed to solving, I think most of what we're talking about today is solving a simple demand-side problem with respect to a centralized model. And I think that whole equation is changing.
Yeah, I think that alludes to another problem potentially, which is, do you have a utility at the center of this orchestrating things from top to bottom all the way down to the customer, or do you somehow figure out where the divide is between behind-the-meter providers or aggregators and the utility? And then what does that interface look like? Is it an open market like a typical ISO that customers are able to participate in directly, or does that put too much risk on customers to feel, really high price swings, and is it too confusing? So I think you're going to see a lot of different states by a lot of different things as far as what does that interface look like? How do we set it up so we have a regulated monopoly who runs the pieces that should be regulated? And then how do we create an open market where there are multiple aggregators, multiple providers that can come into the market a given month and then drop out 3 months later if, something happens, or double the size of what they're providing as far as capacity. So I think that's kind of the question that we need to answer. We need to figure out what does that interface look like. And in California, there's a program called DRAM, which is the Demand Response Auction Mechanism, which is an attempt to create an open market for demand response. I think there are a lot of issues with how it was designed, but it's an attempt to create that division between the third-party providers and the utility company.
Thank you. Question?
I'm Keith Yamanaka. I'm an energy manager for a small local utility, the Army. So my question is, for your technologies, how close do you think DER is going to be codified, say, in building code or whatever codes you have out there? Because the onus seems to be on the utility to make people do things. So, building code's another way. I'm just wondering if it's ever going to be codified.
Yeah, I think you're already starting to see that in some areas. So I live in Denver. I live in Stapleton, which is the old international airport. If anyone ever flew into Denver before our airport moved to Kansas. But that is now a new development, and the building codes in there are basically requiring all new construction starting last year. They come with solar, they come with batteries. You can get the power suite pre-wired for EV, and so I think it's starting to happen. Probably not widespread, certainly not widespread, but I think that for a long time it's still going to be on the electric utility to be pushing a lot of these. In fact, I think it's good for the electric utility to be pushing these things. I've wondered for a long time why utilities aren't pushing EVs more. I mean, it feels like if everyone had an EV, we'd be having a very different set of conversations. And so I think that kind of stuff good for the utility, and therefore likely the utilities are still going to be in the driver's seat pushing those kinds of things for a while.
I think one really interesting thing about that is you mentioned electric vehicles. When you look at oil and gas companies, their combined market capitalizations are several $1 trillion. And I think in 30 years that goes to zero. And the question is, where does it go to? And I think utilities are a shoo-in to capture that market. But they've got to be very clever about it so it doesn't get taken by the likes of Tesla and other kind of new energy economy startups.
I would add, you're absolutely right. Yes, that is happening. That is happening at the building level, and that is happening at the city level as well. The whole concept of smart cities, resiliency at the building level, resiliency at the substation level, et cetera, distributed energy resources give you exactly that. Resiliency at the building level, resiliency at the home level, backup power in case of emergency, and so on and so forth. And in fact, that is what you described is happening.
Question? Yes.
Hi, Veronica Rocha from Hawaii State Energy Office. I have a question for Advanced Microgrid Solutions. And so before we used to see a lot of microgrids that were more like R&D or with DOD, that sort of thing, but now you're starting to see them be more commonplace. And so my question is, in terms of the Advanced Microgrid Solutions, are you now interconnecting those? And what sort of policy and regulatory challenges have you encountered? And how have you been able to overcome those challenges?
The short answer is that our company name isn't exactly accurate. We haven't really done a lot of microgrids. We're doing a project in Maine where we're exploring a microgrid with some partners. I'll go back to whenever the company was formed. I think microgrid was a good buzzword that got people's attention. I mean, really, we're aggregating up behind-the-meter solutions, but they're not necessarily microgrid capability. They could be. We've talked about some of the battery providers, talked with some of the battery providers to see whether they could provide that service to us. And some are willing and some don't have that capability. So I can't answer that question.
Any other panelists? want to comment on that?
Sorry.
Hi, Jeff McLean with Blue Planet Foundation. I'm just curious, when you guys go out and you're working with customers, utilities, what are the biggest obstacles you face? What are the hurdles? Is it a lack of a clear price signal or a framework for that? Is it just the price of the services you're offering? Is it some other challenge? I mean, what's preventing, say, Hawaiian Electric from adopting all of this right now? Or is it just such a busy field that people are having a hard time, choosing among the technologies?
For us, it's data access and data integration. The customers that we are able to get on the system end up having a great experience. We have 60% of them using it, 7 months after they install it. It's great, but the whole process of using Green Button Connect, which is an open standard to share interval data, in the way that Edison and Pacific Gas and Electric and San Diego Gas and Electric have implemented it, is a very painful process for customers. It's 7 steps, 42 key clicks, something like 13 or 14 mouse clicks or taps. So for us, it's open data access, which is kind of why I harp that utilities, I think, to enable the grid of the future and the new energy systems in homes, really need to codify that interface between them and third-party providers.
Actually, we do see the market heating up from a utility perspective. So utilities are waking up and, in fact, are looking at distributed energy resources, whether it's residential or commercial. It's still early on in that process. So, and there are some regulatory obstacles with respect to trying to get below the meter. But there's also a convergence. I mean, there's a concept of integrated demand-side management, which has been around for a long time, but it never became anything other than a concept. But with DERs, now you actually have a glue that can bring in the concept of integrated demand-side management, which is energy efficiency, demand response, et cetera, all at the same time. And I think as I think you're going to see, the regulations move towards that. I think because what you are seeing with distributed energy resources, these are something that actually can be and could be a utility asset. It's a grid asset, but it in fact has customer premise and customer payback, if you will. So it's now, again, the equation has changed, because there are two sides to that story. This is not purely a reduction of a bill for a customer. It's a reduction of bill for a customer, but also an ability to run a grid far more efficient, having less line loss, et cetera, better voltage management, which reduces demand charge reduction, which again should bring up the overall electricity price down. So this is, again, going back, I think the market is actually heating up.
Yeah, I agree. The market is heating up. I do think that there are policy concerns out there that are holding it back. Utilities are looking at distributed resources on the grid, and they're concerned about what does it mean for them as a business. If they're relying on DERs in lieu of wires and poles, taking it to the extreme, then there's a loss of rate base, and what does that do for them? So I think the conversations that are happening in New York through REV and in California through some of the pilots there, as well as even APS's pilot they have for customer-side storage where they're using smart inverters to control voltage, are good examples of utilities finding new ways to create an earnings mechanism through control of third-party DERs.
Yeah, how long do you have? For the answer of what stands in the way, what moves slow, we could spend the rest of the day talking about that. It's every step of the process. And a lot of these things are put in place for good reasons. But there's a regulatory framework that is there to ensure that these effectively legalized monopolies are serving their customers well. Well, that means that everything has to have a case filed, and everything has to go to tender to make sure that they're not favoring one vendor over another vendor. And so the contracting process is 1.5 to 2 years just to get to a pilot. A pilot has to be at least a year, usually 2 years, so you get seasonality effects. They have to be third-party measured and verified. Those have to be publicly filed. every step along the way is, because of this kind of church and state that's set up to ensure consumer protections, things move slowly. And there's no money to be made in startups, selling pilots. The goal is not to get a pilot. The goal is to really, ramp and get to scale. And that's really where you start having an impact on people's lives, on the planet, on utilities' bottom lines. But it just takes a long time to get there.
I think that's one of the reasons that it's so important to have a model or regulatory framework that opens things, that creates boilerplate contracts with third-party vendors and really streamlines the interface between the utility and the partner. And you don't end up, utilities can have their own white-labeled energy management solutions, but I think you really need an ecosystem there to spur innovation and for things to actually happen.
So I have a different opinion on that one. I think there has to be a balance between standardized contracting, streamlined procurement, and enabling innovation. And having run procurement at SCE, there was this challenge where if we said, here's the form of the contract, here's what we're looking for, that's what we would get, but there wouldn't necessarily be the number of responses that we thought we'd see. And flip side is if you do just a white blank page, here, send me whatever you want, it's just out of control. So utilities really need to think about how they design procurement programs to clearly articulate what attributes they're looking to meet, but then let the market be creative in how they meet them. Provide location of needs, provide, like I said, the attributes, whether it's voltage or energy or capacity or whatever it may be, and then let us figure out what the right solution is. And
yeah, I think that's a really good point. Standardization, but with the flexibility built in, so you're not constraining innovation, is really important. But I think also then ensuring that you have a process in place to keep those boilerplate contracts kind of up to date as the world changes. So I was having a conversation last night. It is amazing to me how many RFPs we get that are asking for basically cloud-delivered services like what we deliver, but yet the entire IT questionnaire, which is 12 pages long, is all about running servers in a data center and physical access, which has nothing to do with kind of the service that you're going to provide, but yet you have to answer all those questions in order to be compliant with the response. And so, the world has changed, how software is delivered has changed, but the kind of the standard questionnaire has not changed. And so I think figuring out a process that's both flexible and standardized, but yet living as well, so that it's updating as things change.
Also nurturing that process to eventually get to a point where we're paying, or utilities are paying for performance, not necessarily for a license fee per customer, I think will do a lot for the ratepayers and to really get to the economically most efficient model. That being said, it's kind of a chicken and egg problem, because if you ask for startups or these smaller companies that are smaller than utilities to apply for these pay for performance programs, there's a time delay in money and in cash, and it's going to be hard to get financing behind that until you have a track record. So figuring out how we nurture this economy, get the financiers comfortable with it, much like was done with solar. And once they're comfortable with it, then they can take the risk rather than the startups themselves or the energy providers, energy providers.
Good question. Another question.
So this is why I'm controlling the mic. I have a question. This is Colton Ching from Hawaiian Electric. Thank you so much for the Q&A. I think we're learning a lot about how the utility can think about interfacing with one of your organizations or maybe someone else. But I'd like to get your thoughts sort of on the back end of that, right? So as providers and organizations that are providing services ultimately to utility, I'd like to get your thoughts of how you work with utility customers, right? Potential customers of yours to participate in a program, make an investment in a storage system, all of the decisions that a customer needs to make in order to be a DR participant or use their energy more efficiently. Just want to get just a quick take on how your experiences have been in working with customers to get them engaged, to get them to make the decision to participate.
So what we do is we have a behavioral demand response program in which we ask customers to turn things off, and then they turn things off, and then we pay them for that. There's a lot of uncertainty in that, but we use that as kind of a gateway into the other features and products, and we use that as an engagement tool to keep them interested on an ongoing basis and aware of our brand. So we really view that and kind of the sticker shock of a high bill as the impetus to get into the home. And then from there, we'll recommend solar to a customer. If it makes sense for them, we'll recommend batteries, a smart thermostat, off that trust that we built initially through demand response and, again, through their frustration with their high bill.
Colton, can I ask a clarifying question? When you're talking about customers, are you talking about our customers, meaning the utilities, or are you talking about your customers, the end users?
Well, I mean, thanks for asking that. It's for the customers of the utility that elect to participate in a program that the industry, actually, not just your companies, will offer to those customers to their benefit and ultimately to the utility's benefit.
So we're focused on larger C&I customers, and what we've seen is we really we need support from the local utilities, because what often happens is we find the sustainability manager, whoever's in charge of energy, across the fleet of buildings that they have or at a large wastewater treatment facility, and we talk to them about what we're offering, and what they'll typically do is turn around and go ask SCE, for example, what's going on with these guys? What are they selling, and is it real? And we've run into a lot of challenges where the customer service reps of the local utility aren't aware of the third-party programs like what we're developing. And so their answers are often inaccurate or sometimes misleading, and it just creates more of a challenge for us to get the customers enrolled in the programs. And in California, there's a disconnect. The customer service reps, they're trying to sell the utility programs, the utility demand response and energy efficiency programs, and they're incentivized to do that. Whereas third-party programs, which are also needed for reliability, the customer service reps don't get, there's no incentive for them to push an AMS program, which is fine. There doesn't need to be, but they need to be aware of it so that they can inform customers in an intelligent way. Because I think the large customers, and perhaps most customers, still view the utility as the trusted energy advisor. They're going to go ask their customer service rep what's going on. And I think it's really important for, like I said, the utility to be knowledgeable about what's going on across the grid, who are the different providers, generally what services are they offering, if there are rules about if you participate in an AMS program, you can't participate in a utility program, so that they can explain that to customers. I mean, we do so, but don't always trust us because we're one of a number of companies that are knocking on the customer's door. And I think that in Southern California, it's led to a broader issue where, the utility has relied on a number of third-party providers to develop programs in a relatively small area. And so now all of a sudden customers who are used to only talking to the utility are talking to 12 different companies all selling different widgets. And customers get confused.
So these guys are kind of talking about the experience that end users are having once they're in the program, and that's important. You have to personalize it. You have to give it in timely ways so people understand the value of participating. But that, I think before that, you have to figure out who are the people who should participate. You have a real problem you're trying to solve. It might be a capacity problem in a certain area. It might be a customer satisfaction problem. Whatever the problem you're trying to solve, there are good customers that help solve that problem. There are bad customers that help solve that problem or to make that problem worse. And so So we start with really analyzing the problem that you're having, sitting down with your data, then doing a bunch of data science around it. So we do propensity. So for example, if you're trying to solve a capacity problem and maybe you need a non-wires alternative to solve that problem, we'd sit down and understand, okay, what do those people look like? Who are the good customers that we really want to recruit into this program? What are the characteristics? We'll do propensity scoring on those. We know that individual households that are the ones that should participate in this program, we would do, if you've done similar households in the past, we'd take a lot of that participation data, create lookalike models so we know the characteristics of the people who would contribute to the solution, then do micro-targeting on those and personalized messages so they understand the value of why should I participate, because otherwise, so for example, one of the challenges that TOU pilots are running into is that a lot of the people who end up enrolling into a time of use tariff are the ones who you actually don't want to enroll into the time of use tariff. They're the ones with the EVs that they're charging off hours anyway, and them enrolling in, all that's doing is costing you revenue. It's not helping solve a problem. And so understanding that and understanding the characteristics of the people who are good to help you solve the problem, and then targeting them in personalized ways. So we would give you a propensity score, decile sorted list that says, spend your marketing dollars going after these top 3 deciles and don't worry about the rest of them, rather than expensive mass media, billboards, and radio ads and everything else. Just target the ones that you really want to help you solve that can help you solve the problem.
I would add to that, it's all about targeting. This is not a one-size-fits-all, and definitely you want to target. And in our experience, we work pretty closely with our utility customers to target both C&I as well as target residential customers. And as Chris mentioned, it's all about targeting. You want to target exactly where you think it has the biggest payback for the customer as well as potentially for the utility as well, because better incentives can be given on that case.
Thank you very much. And we're at the end of our time. So can we have a round of applause for our panelists? Thank you very much. If you weren't able to ask a question, they are going to be here, and we're going in